Hello, and welcome to your video on unit planning. This is going to be the most fun thing for you to do. You're going to have so much fun doing this. What is unit planning? Unit planning is planning a like a week or a month or a quarter's worth of lessons around a theme. And so the theme could be anything. You see teachers do this all the time with like a pumpkin theme or a St. Patrick's Day theme. And it's usually like one day, maybe a week or two, like around Valentine's Day, you'll start seeing teachers do some, activities, maybe a week or two before. Around seasons, you'll see teachers create lots of instruction and activities around a theme. And so this can happen in a loose way, whereas kind of like, some of your instruction and activities are tied to a theme, whether that's an event or a time of year or a holiday or whatever you want it to be. Maybe it's a unit that you're working on at your grade level, right? Maybe the solar system is a really big unit in science in fourth grade. I'm not sure if it's fourth grade or not, but let's just, for the time being, say that it is. You could actually use the solar system as your theme and then incorporate design your math instruction, your social studies instruction, all your other instruction, ELA instruction, using that theme. So you're not just studying the solar system in science class, you're really diving deep, right? You're all day long. You're researching about the solar system. You're writing about the solar system. You're studying where the different big telescopes are in the world and why, right? Like I'm just trying to think of, and then maybe measurement activities. And addition, subtraction, you could do so many things, right? So you're just going to use that theme to design your instruction across the content areas. So so you might do this where like a lot of your instruction is designed around a theme. It doesn't all have to be in the real world, it doesn't all have to be tied into one theme. For this assignment, you're going to create a whole week where everything that all the ideas you generate are really tied into this theme. But when you're out in the world teaching, you're going to be doing a lot around this theme, but it doesn't have to be everything. So don't think about thematic unit planning as being something that's kind of like all or nothing. You don't have to be all in. You could, like, if you have some great ideas for how you can integrate maybe a couple of content areas around a theme, that's great. The reason that we do it is because it allows for deeper learning. Right now we teach in such a siloed way, right? We have our math block, we have our reading block, we have our science block, maybe once or twice a week. We have our social studies time, maybe once or twice a week. If you integrate them all, then you have a way of really spending more integrated time, right? With all of the in all of the content areas, in these with these standards that are relevant to your theme. And so to that end, I think next week's video is on curriculum planning and pacing guides and things like that. And we'll talk about how do you kind of land on a theme that's going to work for all of the different standards that you're supposed to teach in a quarter or a year. And so don't worry about that quite yet, because we'll look at that next week and it'll become clear to you that it's not hard. You will be able to look at the standards that you have for a particular year or a quarter and across the different content areas and think about different themes that you might want to teach in. This should be fun for you, right? So pick a theme that's going to be fun for you. And then you can start thinking about, if I used the planets maybe as a theme for the next 2 to 3 weeks, then we could hit this standard this way, this standard, right? It'll start to come together. So that's why we do it. It makes learning so much more enjoyable, engaging. And so highly recommend that you consider doing as much thematic planning, teaching as possible. I knew a teacher. She was one of the best teachers I ever saw, Sharon Hansen. She taught at a private school in Champaign, fifth grade, and she taught thematically throughout the whole year. I wish I had a copy of it right here with me. I do have like an example of how she would make a folder for each student for each unit. And say it was space, they would be building rockets. They would be conducting measurement. Once they build the rockets and set them off, then they would be doing measurement activities and graphing activities. And they were reading about different explorers in space. And oh my gosh, and so the students had like their vocabulary was all tied around it. And it I'm telling you, the students loved it because like they were given their folder for the next 2 to 3 weeks of learning, and they got to choose different things that they wanted to dive deeper into. It just really makes learning so much more engaging than in that kind of siloed way that we traditionally do it. So, how do you do it? Well, I've got some examples. One in particular that I'm going to walk through with you right now, and that is a garden example that I created for second grade. And so I'm going to go through all the different parts, and everything that's underlined here is something that you need to include. I've done you a favor, and what I've done is created a checklist of all of the different parts that you need to have in your thematic unit. And you're welcome. And so you can go to that checklist and print it out or just download it off of our Moodle page to make sure that you're including everything you need to. And then always, I have this garden example on our Moodle page as well. So always go back to this example to see like how much detail do I need for this particular thing or whatever. Okay, we're just going to go through it quickly now, but do go back and read through it as you're building your own unit plan. Go back and look at the example so you can see what's expected. Okay, so I picked the garden theme because I love to garden. And I thought it would be so much fun to do this in the spring where the students can actually, grow a plant to take home at some point. Maybe it'll be a Mother's Day thing. A lot of teachers will do that. Or maybe it'll just be something to take home for the end of the year. But our students are going to grow plants and then measure them and so on. So my theme is gardening, just one word, that's all you need. The unit introduction, actually that should be underlined too, is just one sentence statement about what the theme aims to do. So this second grade thematic unit will have students explore through reading, videos, and experiments what plants need to survive or thrive. Then you have to choose at least one standard from each area. So I've got my science standard, and write out each standard. Don't just put the numbers, but write out each standard. So I've got one from each of the 4 main content areas. And then an essential question. What's driving this work that we're doing all week? We're creating instruction and activities for a whole week. And so what is the overarching question, like our research question? And for this particular thematic unit, it's what do plants need to thrive? There's a lot that comes under that, right, for second graders? So, and then like we write individual lesson objectives for our lesson plans, you're going to write at least 3 objectives for this thematic unit for this whole week. So it's not too specific. For example, look at mine. Students will demonstrate, you're going to use the same format, right? That ABCD format, actor, behavior, criteria, degree. Students will demonstrate an understanding of what plants need by creating an illustration of plant growth. So by the end, they will have created an illustration that shows how plants grow and what they need to grow. Students will gather information on plants from books and videos. So I'm going to be having them do reading. We're going to do read alouds. I'm going to show them videos that I've selected on plant growth. Um, and so I'm going to have them take notes, and I'll check their notes and things like that. Students will conduct experiments with plants to understand their needs. So that's something I'm going to have students grow plants and then conduct experiments with that plant growth. Some of the materials I'm going to be using: unit materials, books on plants, at different reading levels to meet the needs of the class. And you can go to your librarian and she can show you how to, or you could just tell your school librarian, just for future reference, I'm going to be doing, this fall or this spring, I'm going to be doing a unit on the ocean. And but I have readers reading at the kindergarten through fourth grade level. Can you assemble a set of books that cover those reading levels, so that we can have a classroom library set up on the ocean, and your librarian can do that for you. So we're going to have books. I'm going to have videos on plant life, back to the materials here. And we're going to be growing plants. So I need seeds, soil, pots, water, sunny places to grow. And then what you want to do is you want to actually do some research to find specific books that you're going to use throughout your week. And I found 3 that I really fell in love with that I think will really help us to learn about how plants grow and what they need to thrive. And so I've specifically looked through those books online, and because the next part is the unit vocabulary. So list the books there specifically with their author, but then also look through, okay, what is the new vocabulary that my second graders, or whatever grade level it is, they're going to need to learn to be successful with this thematic unit. And so I put all of my vocabulary terms down there that I want my students to learn this week. Now, this is one of the fun things. Now you get to dream up some fun ways for your students to interact with that, with those new vocabulary words. Because what we know from research is that word walls are okay, but if we just put the word up on the wall and don't have students refer to it or interact with it in some way, it becomes wallpaper, right? And so we want them to interact with these words on the wall so that they can learn them, right? So it has a purpose. And so I want you to come up with at least 2 activities where students can interact with the words that you're going to put up on your word wall. And for me, I'm going to have a station, a corner in the classroom where I have a big sheet of paper with a plant drawn on it, and students have to label the different parts of the plant. I'm also going to have the stages of plant life, and the students have to label the different stages. And that will be something I can envision students doing in pairs, and during a station activity, okay, for a station activity. So students have come up with games, different bingo games and relay races and things like that. So really open up your mind and think about how you could have your students interact with their new vocabulary words to help learn them better. The next thing that you're going to do as part of this thematic unit is come up with discussion questions for your class, because a lot of the instruction that we create begins and ends with class discussions, right? It's such an important aspect of instruction. And so I want you to use Bloom's taxonomy to create those. So it's a nice little guide, right? So we start at the lowest level of remember. What's some information that you want your students to remember? For me, it's what are the parts of a plant and what do plants need to grow and thrive? They just have to memorize that, really. But then the next level is understand. So why do students think that plants need sunlight to grow? What is that about? They're learning about photosynthesis, right? It's part of the growth process, but you need sun. It's an important element. But they need to they've got to kind of deduct that, right? So, and understand that process contributes to growth. So So the next level is understand, why do plants need to, how does a plant use the water that you give it? And so these are some examples of where students have to not just memorize facts, but understand what those facts are important for. The next level is apply. So how can we apply what we're learning in the real world? And one thing that we have that I've done here is had students consider, okay, knowing what you know about what plants need, where's the best place for us to grow plants? Can you describe, if I give you a different plant, can you describe, than the ones we've been using in our examples, can you describe what its life cycle might look like? So they're applying what they're learning. Next one is analyzing, right? The next step in the growth is analyzing. And my two questions are, what season is best for growing plants and why? What might be wrong if your plant is not growing? So they really have to do some critical thinking, right? About using the knowledge that I have. What does that mean for things that might go wrong? Or when's the best time of the year to do this? So they really need to do some analysis. The next level is evaluate. And so these are the questions that I came up with. What happened when you watered plants at different rates? So they're going to be doing experiments and evaluating their results. And then make a list of your 4 favorite fruits and vegetables. What would grow well here and why? How do you know that, right? So they've got to start putting pieces together and to do that evaluation. And finally, create is the final lesson of Bloom's taxonomy. And so I'm having them choose the best plants for a school garden and then create a design for the garden based on what they've learned. So here, you need to generate 2 discussion questions at each level of Bloom's taxonomy for this section of your unit plan. The next part is to come up with 5 different ways in which you can differentiate your instruction throughout the week for the different needs of your students, whether they're English language learners or students with learning challenges, or students that work at a faster pace or a higher level, reading level than other students. So what can you do? And again, you don't have specific students to design these differentiation ideas around. And so you really have to think in general. What are some strategies I can employ? So I have here having books at different reading levels will help. Having ebooks for students that maybe have dyslexia or are reading at a couple grade levels below. I can have them listen to books and follow along. I can have anchor charts around with information. This is good for English language learners. And I will ask students for their ideas on what they want to learn, so I can use student inquiry and interest to keep students motivated. And then I'm also going to employ graphic organizers and notes pages so that students are facilitated in gathering the most important information they're going to need. You might also talk about like reteaching concepts to small groups, pairing students in collaborative learning and pairing them strategically so they can help one another. These are just some other ideas that you can use to differentiate. Remember UDL. Think back to that 115 class that you took on what are some different strategies that I can use to help students in my class that might need support. The next part of your unit plan are 5 project ideas. And so these are just 5 little activities that you could have students do throughout the week. And you see I have them draw and label a plant, life cycle, make a parts of the plant flip book, plant and care for a seed, and then a plant, measure and graph the class plants, and paint a picture of a plant or write a poem or song about a plant. So these are just some things that I'm going to have them do throughout the week. So these is just one statement ideas of things that you might have students do. And then these might find themselves, or probably will find themselves, in your week's worth of activities that I'm going to go over next. Next, part of this This unit plan summary is your mini lessons. So what are just some ideas for mini lessons that you might teach students? Well, I have to teach them about the parts of the plant, right? Because they don't know that. I have to teach them about the life cycle of a plant. And then I think I'm going to invite somebody in from a local nursery or farm or something. I think that would be fun to talk about what plants grow well in this area. And so that's just 3 ideas, right? It doesn't have to be comprehensive. Just think of 3 ideas that you might have for lessons. And then last 2 sections, one is assessment. So how are you going to be assessing your students throughout the week? So formatively or informally, I'm going to be taking observation notes and talking with students as they're working. I might do individual interviews throughout the week to see how students are doing, if they're doing research or whatever, how that's going. I might have interim deadlines if there's like a big project that students are doing in groups or individually by the end of the week. I might be having checkpoints throughout the week for them to have a certain amount of that done each time, just like I have for you for this unit plan. And then summative. So what is kind of something that I'm going to use to measure those lesson objectives for each student by the end of the unit plan? Every student's going to do a garden plan, they're going to do a plant diagram, a flip book, and they're going to grow a plant. So these are my summative assessments. And then finally, what's the culminating activity? Kind of like the big fun thing, think science fair or one of those, a field trip. It might be a field trip as your culminating activity, or it might be like those wax museums where each person dresses up like, an inventor or someone from history. So think about some kind of culminating event at the end of your week. For us, it's going to be creating the plans of a school garden, and figuring out where that school garden is going to be and pitching that idea to the school board so that we can have a school garden. So that is the outline of your thematic unit plan. And so each part of it you have an example of each part of it here, and you also have that checklist. So make sure you use that. In the next video, I'm going to go over the second 2 parts of your thematic unit, which is your week's worth of activity. It says here also you need a chart showing plans for 1 week, and then lesson plans for 2 activities. So in addition to this summary that you have to create, you also want to fill in this week's worth of activities table and create 2 lesson plans. And so I'm going to talk about those in the next video.